People just love a conspiracy theory, and no matter how crazy and absurd they might seem, many folks still believe them. Perhaps it's just exciting to believe in a large-scale government cover-up. After all, there have been a few of them in the past, but the truth is, as much as it might be intriguing to unravel a cover-up, many of these conspiracy theories are so ludicrous, you wonder who came up with them. For such theories, they're easy to discard. However, some theories come across as truth rather than fiction. Not only do they sound logical, but they also sound plausible. These are the conspiracy theories that leave us going, because somewhere in our brains, we can see how it totally makes sense. Ever heard of one of these? Well, in this video, we'll be discussing 5 conspiracy theories that are almost unquestionable. Number 5. Coronavirus was made in a lab. One notable feature of conspiracy theories is that they tend to spring up when inexplicable events take place. Events like a pandemic that has taken the lives of over 4 million people around the world. When news first broke of a virus killing people in the Chinese city of Wuhan, the initial explanation of the origin of the deadly virus was that it was passed on to humans from bats sold in Wuhan's popular wet markets. But as COVID-19 began to spread across the globe, many people began to question the Chinese government's explanation of the origin of the virus. Things became more suspicious when it was discovered that right in the city of Wuhan is a virology institute where researchers have been studying different variants of coronaviruses in bats for years. In fact, one of the most prominent researchers at the institute, Shi Li, had spent years collecting dung samples of bats from bat caves. She was also a lead expert of the SARS outbreak that broke out years before. Li was so concerned about the possibility that the virus leaked out of the lab that she had spent several days frantically going through the lab records to see what might have gone wrong. She later expressed her relief after learning that the generic sequencing of the virus found in humans did not match any of the coronavirus variants that were sampled and studied at the Wuhan lab. However, this has not stopped conspiracy theorists from sticking to their version of the virus origin, explaining that the presence of a virology lab at the epicenter of the virus is too much of a coincidence to be ignored. The idea of the virus leaking out of the Wuhan lab was first introduced in a 1-hour documentary produced by Epoch Times, a news outlet based in the United States, with links to the religious cult called Falun Gong, which has been persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. Since the release of the documentary, the idea of the Wuhan lab leak has gone mainstream, drawing the attention of the United States government, who have investigated the possibility that the virus might have indeed come from the lab. But the theories didn't stop there. According to a study conducted by Pew Research, nearly 3 in 10 Americans believe that the coronavirus was made in a lab, and 23% of those people also believe that it was intentionally designed in the lab, implying that the coronavirus was created as a biological weapon. This idea became even more prevalent in the United States when U.S. Senator Tom Cotton expressed the same sentiments in the Washington Examiner, a highly conservative media outlet. Whether or not you choose to believe this theory is up to you, but all we can say is, Number 4. The 2020 U.S. presidential elections was rigged. No one would easily forget the stop the count chants on the night of the 2020 U.S. elections. The elections of that year marked a new low for American politics. There hasn't been a more controversial U.S. election in modern history. The election was unlike any other. No thanks to the raging pandemic, campaign rallies were subdued. Even presidential debates were affected too. But of all the things the pandemic affected in the format of the United States elections, the large-scale use of mail-in ballots for people to vote was the most contested. Mail-in ballots had always been available in previous elections, but in the face of a pandemic that the United States government was struggling to deal with at the time, it became a more prominent feature of the elections. Sensing that it might be an issue, Donald Trump rallied his supporters and urged them to shun the mail-in ballot options and go to the polls to vote physically, fearing that the Democrats had planned to manipulate the mail-in ballots. It was not a new claim, though. Before the 2016 elections, Trump also said that the elections would be rigged by the Democrats to favor Hillary Clinton. Instead, Trump secured an upset win, and that was the end of his rigging conspiracy theories. But this time in 2020, Trump faced a real threat in Joe Biden, who, unlike Trump, urged his supporters to stay home and vote using the mail-in ballots instead. The scene was set for a dramatic finale. On Election Day, Trump rallied to an early lead, and with the numbers only trickling in, again due to the pandemic, he was quick to give a somewhat subdued victory lap. However, the tides would dramatically turn against him when the mail-in ballots across many swing states started counting, with most of them favoring the Democrats. Trump defiantly claimed that there was a large-scale voter fraud, rallying his supporters to challenge the results of the elections. As a result, an overwhelming number of Republican supporters believe to this day that the election was rigged and stolen from Trump. Trump and his legal team lost over 60 cases in court in a bid to challenge the elections, and Biden had since been sworn in as president, putting an end to any objections from Donald Trump. However, Trump's conspiracy theory is still very much believed by the majority of his supporters. Number 3. The Holocaust never happened. Between 1941 and 1945, over 6 million Jews were killed throughout Europe through a horrific genocide campaign carried out by Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party in what became known as the Holocaust. The Holocaust is one of the best documented events in world history, with living survivors still around to tell the tale and evidence to support its occurrence. However, there are still a lot of people who do not believe that the Holocaust ever happened. Some also believe that although the event did happen, the death toll has been massively exaggerated. To illustrate this perception, in a survey conducted by the Anti-Defamation League in 2014, where 53,000 people from 100 countries were questioned, only 30% of respondents believed that the historical accounts of the Holocaust are accurate. Most of the respondents who were below the age of 65 were more inclined to believe that the accounts were inaccurate. Anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists continue to advance the notion that the Holocaust was either invented or exaggerated to promote sympathy towards the Jewish people and to provide monetary benefits for them. At the time that the Holocaust took place, it was very easy to believe that it was indeed a fabrication. The Germans were very secretive about the operation. Many Germans had no clue about the Nazi concentration camps, and many of them denied there was ever anything of that sort. However, in the years following World War II and after the dismantling of the Nazi Party, irrefutable evidence confirming the events of the Holocaust were uncovered. Today, it is a well-known fact that the Holocaust happened, but that was not always the case, which is why the conspiracy still survive to date. Number 2. The cover-up of JFK's assassination. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy Jr. was one of the most tragic events in the history of American politics. He was one of America's most loved presidents and one of the most handsome, too. But somehow, as his motorcade passed through Dallas, Texas, President John F. Kennedy was shot. A man named Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for the assassination. But just 2 days after Oswald was arrested, while being transported to a local jail, Lee Oswald was killed by Jack Ruby, a Texas nightclub owner. To many observers, the events just didn't add up. How could the President of the United States, the most powerful man on the planet, be killed in broad daylight? And 2 days later, the said assassin was also killed while in the custody of the FBI. The sequence of events sent conspiracy theorists into overdrive. By the late 60s, more than 50% of Americans did not believe that Lee Oswald acted alone. And as recently as 2017, in a survey carried out by 538 Reports, 61% of Americans believe that JFK's assassination involved some kind of conspiracy. Some believe the CIA had a role to play in JFK's death as a retaliation for the failed Bay of Pigs operation to overthrow Cuban director Fidel Castro. While this seems too incredible to be true, the House of Representatives Select Committee on Assassinations found that there was a probable conspiracy in the assassination of JFK that involved a second shooter. However, whatever the actual conspiracy might be, no one really knows for sure. But the reality seems more likely a conspiracy than not. Number 1. Princess Diana's death was no accident. The death of Princess Diana shook the world. Known as the People's Princess, she was loved and admired the world over. But following a bitter divorce from Prince Charles 1 year later, in 1997, Diana was killed in a fatal car crash in Paris. At the time of her death, Diana was dating Dodi Fayed, an Egyptian filmmaker who also died in the car crash with her. It was rumored that Fayed was about to propose to Diana that night. According to Fayed's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed, Diana and his son were killed because the monarchy could not stand the thought of Diana's sons, William and Harry, having a stepfather who was an Egyptian and a Muslim. When you think about it, especially with how the royal family has treated Meghan Markle, it's not that ridiculous of a claim. Looking at the details of the event, it's also shocking that Diana was not immediately rushed to a hospital for medical emergency and was instead treated at the scene of the crash. This is completely against France's emergency medical protocol. So why did they do it to her? Especially considering how well known she was at the time. This action is what strengthened the public's view that maybe, just maybe, Princess Diana's death was no accident. What do you guys think? Are there any conspiracy theories that you believe to be completely true? Please share them with us in the comments section down below. For more videos like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification so you never miss an upload. See you in our next video.